Hello, entrepreneurs. Welcome back to another course video. I'm Ariella Trotsenko from NICERN, and let's begin our lecture discussion on Agile Development, the third pillar of the Lean Launchpad methodology. For this agenda, we're going to cover in the next 10-15 minutes the origin of Agile and the history, why Agile matters over Waterfall Engineering, what is Agile Development, going over specifically the 12 principles to guide you, and going into the Agile Development roadmaps, the different types of development timelines that you may also use for your final presentation. So let's get started. Where did Agile originally originate from? Well, during the 1900s, which was a decade that saw explosive growth of internet use spurred by AOL, as you could see at the top bottom corner, software that offered for accessing internet and email. It turned out that this was a time where a number of lightweight software development methods evolved in reaction to the prevailing, already being used heavyweight methods. So what this meant was that heavyweight methods were traditional methodologies based on a sequential series of steps, so to say. So what we used to believe in Waterfall Engineering, as you can see from this diagram, which was first presented traced back into the 1970s by software engineer Herbert Bennington, where they showed progress flowing from the top to the bottom, kind of like a cascading waterfall. So what they thought was best was to start by outlining the system requirements captured in a product requirements document. Next, you would design what we would call the fundamental structures of the software system, followed by implementation, the installation, such as the verification and migration support, ultimately leading up to the maintenance of system. This was such a heavily adopted way of creating software that actually even the DoD adopted this as their standard for working with software development contractors, in which the contractor shall develop the software development cycle that includes all of the following phases. Well, it turned out that around 10 years later in the 2000s, or specifically in 2001, 17 software developers met together in a ski resort in Utah to discuss the changing methods from waterfall processes, heavyweight methodologies, and converting it to agile engineering, what we call lightweight methodologies. And what they wanted to popularize was the understanding, designing, and then again, understanding and designing point of view, this iterative process, this new model that allowed people to really be adaptive to changes from their customer needs. And if you really think about it, you already know this methodology quite well. Agile works hand in hand with the needs of the customers, just like in customer discovery, which comes from understanding your customer needs and being able to satisfy them through iteration and pivoting. Customer validation is when you already have the product that will satisfy your customer needs. Ultimately, customers may not know what the requirements they are before purchasing, and so changing their requirements through re-understanding and redesigning and rebuilding is where Agile really comes into. Customer development is helpful when you don't know the problem, and Agile development is super helpful when you don't know the solution. Both approaches are ways to iteratively validate assumptions through customer feedback and customer discovery. So what grew out of the meeting with those 17 software developers popularizing this new model came out the Agile Manifesto, which really, unlike typical long product development cycles, really proposed the knowledge of customer problems and product needs. Agile development eliminates the wasted time and resources by developing a product iteratively and incrementally. And so here, as you see, individuals and interactions over processes and tools. They favor working software over comprehensive documentation of details of how it really works, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, and responding to change over following a plan. And this is to say that the items on the left are more valued than the ones on the right. It's not to say that the over items on the right should be excluded in the favor. Both have value, but from the agile development point of view, the authors of the manifesto tipped the balance in favor of those following things. It is so popularized that they even have this same old website that's being used. And if you wanted to check it out more on the manifesto for Agile software development, then you can just go to agilemanifesto.org. They have not changed this since they made this in 2001. So let's go a little bit more into what those 12 principles are so you can really understand what is Agile development. So each iteration favors working iteratively, incrementally, and evolutionary. So for the first three principles, what they say is that customer satisfaction by early and continuous delivery of valuable software. At the end of each iteration, you want a working product that is demonstrated to stakeholders. And this will overall minimize most of the risks and allow the product to adapt to changes, as mentioned in number 2, welcoming changes and even in late development. Number 3, deliver working software frequently, going into, again, learning from customer needs and being able to adapt incrementally and evolutionary. Moving on to the next 3 set of principles, we have efficient and face-to-face communication focus. Face-to-face can also mean in the world of video face-to-face as well. So what they say is close daily cooperation between business people and developers, meaning that the ones actually engaged in the technical work really should be part of the customer discovery process. It's important that those actually engaged in product development really know what customers value. Products are built around trust. This is good with any team, motivated individuals who can be trusted. And lastly, face-to-face conversations. This always includes communication with customers, best face-to-face communication. Again, this can mean in the form of video. It allows you to reduce the cycle typically taken with questions by being able to see the eyes of the customer light up, as Steve Blank says. Moving on to another 3, focusing on the theme of very short feedback loop and adoption cycle. So as number 8 mentions, working software is really the primary measure of progress. Team members report what they did in the previous day, working towards the next iteration's goals and what they intend to do. Really continuous attention to technical excellence and good design, working in a very fast-paced environment because you're a nimble startup with very limited resources. Moving on to the last 3 principles to sum up all 12 is really a theme of quality and focus. Simplicity, the art of maximizing the amount of work not done, is really essential. Specific tools and techniques such as continuous integration, really following improving quality and enhancing the product development agility. Really regularly, the team reflects on how to become more effective and adjust accordingly. That's what it's all about, being able to respond to change as it comes and as the customer needs develop. So you may be thinking now at this point, well, I don't do software, so Agile development does not really help me. Well, sure it does. Agile development does benefit non-software projects, and almost any project can be managed as an Agile product. Almost any. Well, the key is to viewing Agile as a mindset rather than a set of guidelines. Agile in a non-software environment takes both time and proper planning. That way you can actually ensure that you benefit from Agile practices. So the theme of Agile is really changing requirements, changing techniques, simple design, and minimum system into production. This really is not the only core things for software, and any organization, almost any, can benefit from using Agile development. So I'd like to walk you through the Doughnut Dilemma, which is, what would your final product look like if you intended to introduce it through a range of donuts? So after you getting started on developing a product or your product, you need to see if it has any potential. And the simplest way to do this is to do a proof of concept. A proof of concept is a small project
mainly to check if it's really possible to be executed. And after proof of concept is what we call prototype, which after this course is hopefully be the stage that you are entering, or you may already be at this stage of prototype. A prototype shows how a product will work and what it looks like. It can be shown to your team members, it can be shown to team members outside of the project, and even potential stakeholders such as mentors and advisors, but it really gets across that this has some potential. So as you see here, a little mock-up, it could be a sketch. I know the prototype looks like a CD, so I enhanced it here a bit. It gets the core concept across. So remember when we talked about in value props, the MVP, the minimum viable prototype, also known as a low fidelity, low feature item that can get in the hands of your early adopters? Well, the MVP is the next step after the prototype. It might include some functionality, even restricted works. However, its advantage is that it can be given to the outside world. It provides a purpose for your prototype. The MVP also includes some features that you may have now added as a result of learning the benefits from customers, right? Really learning about what the problem and use case is there. So going back to a donut, don't lie to me. Everybody knows that's not a real donut. That's just a cake with a hole in it. It's not the final product yet. So continuing on with the Doughnut Dilemma, we end up with the final donut. It's got some icing, it's got some sprinkles. And the point of this is to ultimately articulate that there's a long road in between idea and final product. So use your skills by going out and talking to stakeholders and testing out some of your core business assumptions, as well as keeping in the back of your mind how you can learn from technical insights and constantly be able to adapt and iterate your business model to meet customer needs. That's why Agile, a huge component of it is roadmaps. This is where you'll be able to create one for your final presentation. So get your pen and paper ready, as you may want to follow along some of the process and explanation of what each of these roadmaps are. There are thousands of different Agile product templates out there, but the three most commonly used and popularized ones that you should consider for your final presentation are the following. 1, goal-oriented, 2, now, next, and later, and 3, storyboards. The definition of an Agile roadmap is really just a visual written guide depicting the different stages in the product development. But what I want you to consider is using the Agile roadmap as a really way to visualize depicting the different stages in your business model development. So we'll start with my first and personal favorites, the now, next, and later roadmap. I like this a lot because it's an audience-based roadmap. Roadmaps aren't only useful for aligning your own team or other stakeholders, but it's really useful as communicating with the rest of the ecosystem that you have. And this can really make showing your needs in a very simplistic and visual way. So focusing in on the now, think of this as very granular areas of support, very specific design, things that you may be working on now. This is quite easy to conceptualize. The next is what you may need to do in 3 to 6 months. And so taking into account on the business model development, what other things are necessary for you to validate in order to determine that you have product market fit. Thinking next also cast a wider area of focus. So really thinking maybe now that you have to interview a totally new customer segment, or thinking that here is where you're really going to add some new features. You have some flexibility in the next. Later is really the high level, broad scope. What are you going to do in a year from now? Or what do you hope to do? And so the now, next, later is a really vague way of determining what you'll be able to do in your next steps, but at least it outlines all of your thoughts. Really get it out there, what you think each of these phases looks like, to be able to conceptualize some of your thoughts. So now, what you're currently doing and currently investing time or resources in. Next, things you'll work about in the near future, or things you would like to work in the near future, and later in anything that you can't do in any of those terms in terms of tech, manpower, and finances. I like this a lot because I think it's really easy for everyone to understand, and it doesn't include dates, so it offers you this flexibility in your timeline. Some more specific roadmaps include the goal-oriented product map. This shows specific metrics and goals that your product or your business may be able to achieve in certain stages. So as you see, it's outlined here by date, by the name of the release, or potentially the name of the different box of the canvas, your goal for each of those, the features, and metrics. What quantifies success for you? Think back to your value props as to what really moves the needle for your customers here. What's the metric needed to be achieved in each specific goal? So think about this if you have a very short timeline with a lot of things that you need to accomplish in that short timeline. So what this can look like, if you really visualize this from a company perspective, I'll leave this here for you to look through in detail and pause your screen for a moment if you are in the software field, and take some notes here as to what a great agile goal-oriented product roadmap looks like. But moving along, we'll be going through our third and final agile development roadmap, which is a story map. So this is an excellent way to create a nice overview of all the features or all the business model elements that your stakeholders can think of. Although the idea is not to create an unlimited list of features and functionalities that'll be used, it does start a nice starting point for you to facilitate some of the really creative ideas you have for your product. So if you're more focused on really thinking of the blue sky vision ahead, this is a story map, in my opinion, that allows you to kind of work backwards in the process and really get you to focus in more. So that brings us to a conclusion of this discussion, and I'm going to walk through 3 major summary points. Agile development works hand in hand with customer development. As you do interviews and speak to stakeholders, be sure to remember, how does this not only affect your business model canvas, but how does this also affect in terms of your technical insights, and adapt what your actual core technology or product or service or idea is. Unlike typical year-long product development cycles, agile development eliminates wasted time and resources by developing the product iteratively and incrementally. Those are the key words, iteratively and incrementally. And lastly, it's the process by which startups create their minimum viable products that they test from ideas and prototypes. So this is exactly the stage you should be at in your startup lifecycle, starting to develop the MVP in relation to what you've learned from 20 interviews. So go out there and make your final roadmap for your final presentation. Get out of the building.